B-March Boxing back at it with another, not boxing video, but a basketball video. Now it's been a while since I've done one of these, you know. When I talk basketball on this channel, although this is a boxing channel, when I do talk basketball, you best believe I'm not talking about none of these new cats. I could do that too, you know. I could talk about the current NBA landscape and what goes on now, but more times than not, when I do make a basketball video, you best believe it's going to be talking about the uh, legends of the game, fellas from yesteryear. You check it? All right, now I'm here watching this World Cup, Croatia versus Brazil. It's in extra time. Brazil's up 1-0. Neymar scored. And I said, yo, let me do a little basketball video. So there's some thought-provoking stuff right here. You know, whenever I talk basketball, not really debate basketball with fellas, but talk basketball with guys who know the game. I'm talking about, you know, fellas who've at least watched basketball since the 90s or even prior to that, from the 80s, whatever. And one question I always bring up, this is not a question I really hear anybody talk about, whether it's on YouTube or even when barbershop type of debates, you know what I mean? Or conversations, excuse me. Um, Karl Malone and Charles Barkley, greatest power forwards of the 90s. The 2000s, we have Tim Duncan and Kevin Garnett. Now, let me put a little context into this video as before we delve deeper into this conversation. Now, you know, by the time Karl Malone had retired, he was definitely recognized by many, the majority of people who know basketball, as the greatest power forward of all time. You know what I mean? Now, by the time Tim Duncan retired, it's no question without a doubt who the greatest power forward of all time is, and that's Tim Duncan, you know? But like I said, prior to that, it was Karl Malone. Now, Karl Malone played in the 90s versus guys like Charles Barkley, you know, Sean Kemp, Otis Thorpe, Charles Oakley. You know, the best power forwards really and truly were in the Western Conference, you know what I mean? And, you know, so the conversation we're about to have right now is really and truly about who is the better power forwards. Is it Malone and Barkley, or is it Kevin Garnett and Tim Duncan? You know what I'm saying? Now, let's talk about it. Fellas like Charles Barkley, man, he's a legend, no question about it. You know, played 16 years in the NBA, came into the NBA in 1984, draft pick number 5 overall in one of the greatest draft classes of all time, 1984 draft, which had Hakeem Olajuwon pick number 1 to the Houston Rockets, Sam Bowie number 2 to the Portland Trail Blazers. Oh yeah, let's go. Croatia just scored. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about, man. I want to see penalties. I want to see this thing go to penalties. Woo! Sorry, y'all. I'm hyped, man. I'm doing this live. You know, this is a live video, raw and uncut. You're gonna hear all my emotions. Whatever. It is what it is. So, like I said, Charles Barkley came into that draft. Number 3 pick, 84, was Michael Jordan from North Carolina. Went to the Chicago Bulls. Number 4 was Sam Perkins. And number 5 was Charles Barkley, okay? Great draft class. Now, Charles Barkley, like I said, played 16 years in the NBA. Career averages 22.1 per game, points per game, 11.7 rebounds and 3.9 assists, you know what I mean? You know, Charles Barkley is, you know, that 11.7 rebounds is what really stands out to me, you know? This guy, Charles Barkley, man, he's always been listed as 6'6". 6'6" is a small power forward by no stretch of the imagination. That's a small power forward. But really and truly, Charles Barkley said it himself. He's really 6'4.5" to 6'5", you know? And to amass that many rebounds, 11.7, is amazing. It's amazing. It's remarkable. 16 years in the NBA, he came to the Philadelphia 76ers. He got traded in 92-93 season for fellas like Jeff Hornacek, maybe Andrew Lang. I can't remember everybody who was in that trade. And, you know, he played for Phoenix, and then after that he played for the Houston Rockets. Okay, and his field goal percentage also jumps out to me. Charles Barkley for his career was a 54% from the field. You know what I mean? That's what he shot. 54% from the field goal percentage. That's remarkable. I always told fellas, man, fellas like Zion Williams on the New Orleans Pelicans currently, he reminds me of Charles Barkley's and the Larry Johnsons, a small, undersized power forward who gets a lot of layups and dunks, easy baskets, because they strong like that. You know what I mean? You know, Charles Barkley, like I said, man, 3.9 assists, blocks, zero point 0.8, not really a big shot blocker. You know what I mean? And steals, he averaged 1.5 steals per game. Okay? That's Charles Barkley in a nutshell. 16-year pro. He's a 11-time All-Star. He's a one-time MVP, 92-93. His first year in Phoenix Suns, when he took them to the NBA Finals, and they lost 4-2, 4-2 to the Michael Jordan Chicago Bulls. That was Charles Barkley's MVP year. Was it his greatest year of his career? Possibly, but I thought Charles Barkley should have won the MVP in 1990 season, the 89-90 season. The Magic Johnson got the MVP that year, but Charles Barkley in 88-90 was a beast, man. He had the great numbers: 25 a game, 11.5 boards. The man was a terror on the Philadelphia 76ers. When he came to Phoenix, he took him to the NBA Finals. But after that, really and truly, man, his body started to betray him, started to deteriorate, and he was very injury prone. Ooh, you check it. Now, Charles Barkley. Now, let's talk about his playoff averages. His playoff averages, he's at 23 points per game, points per game in the playoffs, 13 rebounds per game, or 12.9 if you want to be extra exact. And his field goal percentage was 51%, which is pretty good still. You know what I mean? If you're shooting over 50% in an NBA career, you knew how to pick your shots. Absolutely. So let's talk about Karl Malone. We're going to compare these guys all together, and we're going to determine who the better power forwards is. Okay? Karl Malone, he averaged 25 points per game for his career, 10.1 rebounds per game for his career, and 3.6 assists for his career. Now, one thing about Karl Malone and Charles Barkley, neither guy were great defenders. You know what I mean? No, they were not great defenders. Karl Malone is a 0.8 blocks per game for his career, and 1.4 steals. If you remember Karl Malone wasn't a guy who would really jump up there and try to block your shot on some Mutombo type of stuff. You know what I mean? Them fellas wasn't going up there on Hakeem Olajuwon, Mutombo, and David Robinson, Alonzo Mourning, Patrick Ewing trying to swat shots. Nah, Karl Malone was strong like that. You check it, Karl Malone had these big, strong-ass hands. He was the type of guy who strips the ball. He would strip you, like a guard in and around the paint. You trying to go up, bang, he's stripping you. That was his defense. But like I said, Karl Malone is definitely not known for his defense in his career. Karl Malone is known as a prolific scorer. Karl Malone, before, fellas like LeBron surpassed him, Karl Malone retired as the second greatest leading scorer in NBA history behind Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You know what I mean? Karl Malone is a guy, who's how many years he played? 19 years in the NBA. He came into the NBA in 1985, a year after Charles Barkley. And he's a guy who's a, 14-time All-Star. He's a two-time NBA MVP, two-time All-Star MVP, four-time All-Defensive team, you know what I mean? And he's a 14-time All-Star. And, of course, he's a Hall of Famer, top NBA 75, all that good stuff. You check it. I didn't get to finish giving y'all Charles Barkley accolades. I just mentioned that he was an NBA MVP in 92-93. He's also the All-Star Game MVP in 1991 All-Star Game. I'm not sure if Charles Barkley made any all defensive teams. I don't recall him making any, but he won the rebounding championship in 1987, the rebounding title, and he's an 11-time All-Star. Okay, but of course he's an All NBA top 75. You know what I mean? Now him and Charles Barkley and Karl Malone are considered the greatest power forwards of their era. And by the time their careers were over, many people regarded Charles Barkley and Karl Malone as the two greatest power forwards of all time. Now, me personally, my opinion, who did I think was a better player? Uh, Karl Malone was more disciplined, had more longevity. Karl Malone was not. He was a strong dude. He would never get injured. Karl Malone used to always play 82 games often. Him and Stockton. He was never plagued by injuries in his whole career, up until he came. You remember Karl Malone? If he played 19 years in the NBA, 18 of them was on Utah. Then his 19th season in the NBA, he went to the Los Angeles Lakers trying to chase a ring with Shaq and Kobe, and Gary Payton joined him. And like I said, Karl Malone never got injured in his life, in his career really, serious injuries. But when he came to Los Angeles, man, he blew his knee out. He blew his knee, had the ACL joint. You know what I mean? And it was devastating. You know, the man was trying to get himself a ring, and he never had no serious injuries. And boom, he gets a serious injury, and he never played basketball in the NBA ever again. Okay? Now, Kevin Garnett is a guy from the 2000s, all right? Kevin Garnett's a great player. Came kid out straight out of high school. You know what I'm saying? You know, Kevin Garnett is a guy who played 21 years in the NBA, 21 whole seasons. Career averages of 17.8 points per game, 10 rebounds, and 3.7 assists. Okay? Uh, his field goal percentage was 49.7. Sorry, let me give y'all the man Karl Malone's field goal percentage for his career, because I ain't get to give it to you guys. His field goal percentage was 51.4. Okay, so Charles Barkley was shooting better from the field. Hey man, Brazil and Croatia, man, they doing penalties right now, boy. It's about to give you all the popping. It's about to be all the popping, boy. Okay, let me finish up, man. Karl Malone, Kevin Garnett now. I told you 49.7 percent from the field for his career, but blocks, he's a 1.4 in blocks, 1.4 blocks per game for his career, and steals, he's a 1.3, 1.3. Now, obviously, his 17.8 points per game pales to guys like Karl Malone, who averaged 25 for his career. You know, 25 for his career, while Charles Barkley, he averaged 22 for his career. And now we go to Tim Duncan, okay? You know, Tim Duncan is a great player, you know what I mean? Sorry, I got to give you the man Kevin Garnett's accolades one time, all right? Okay. He's a four-time rebounding champ to Barkley's one time, and Malone never won a rebounding title. He's an NBA champion, 2008 NBA champion with my Boston Celtics. You know what I mean? Malone and Barkley obviously don't have an NBA championship. KG's a 15-time All-Star. He's a 9-time All-NBA player. He's a 12-time All-NBA defensive. 12-time All-NBA defense. And he's a 2008 Defensive Player of the Year. And he's a 2004 NBA MVP. Okay, so he's done certain things that Malone and Barkley have never done. Like all 12-time All Defense and a 4-time rebounding champ, okay? Bet. 21-year pro. Now let's talk about Tim Duncan, the man who universally is recognized as the greatest power forward of all time, all right? All right, this guy averaged 13, he's a 19-year career, had a career of 19 years, right? 19 points per game for his career, 10.8 rebounds, and 3 assists per game for his career. His field goal percentage was, for his career, is 50%, all right? 50%, 50.6% for the man Tim Duncan, okay? Blocks per game, for his career, he's a 2.2 blocks per game. Steals, 0.7. Let me see what this Croatian about to do. Hold tight, man. I'm doing this video raw and uncut while I'm watching the World Cup. Let me see what this man about to do for Croatia. He got it. 1-0. Let's go. Okay. All right. So with that being said, accolades for the man, um, Tim Duncan. He's a 15-time All-Star, 5-time NBA champion, 2-time NBA MVP, 15-time NBA All-Star, 15-time All NBA, 15-time All NBA defensive team, 3-time Finals MVP, 2-time NBA MVP, and 2000 MVP in the All Star game. Okay, and of course he's an All NBA top 75. Let me see what this Brazilian about to do. Damn, that joint froze. Okay, so obviously 2.2 blocks per game is nothing to sneeze at. All right, let's see if this Brazilian gonna bang this. Look like he did. There's a replay. He did. Oh, that Jay playing with us, man. All right, so those are the accolades, man. Now let's put the stats away and let's talk about these guys on the court and what they really meant to their teams. You know, like I said, Charles Barkley was a guy. Nobody's ever going to come here and talk about Charles Barkley as the most disciplined guy as far as keeping his weight together. You know, Charles Barkley's a guy who said before every basketball game, he would go to McDonald's and have 2 fish fillets with cheese, Modric. There we go. Okay. He'd have 2 fish fillets from Mickey D's and a Diet Coke. That was his pregame meal. Not necessarily the healthiest, but hey, that's what Charles Barkley does, right? Okay. Malone and Barkley. Now, personally, I think Barkley was the better player. You know, Barkley was the type of guy who could get the rebound, take that joint coast to coast, might even yank somebody on the way to the rack and flush that joint with stupid power. You know what I mean? Karl Malone got a lot of his points in the pick and roll with Stockton. Ooh! 2-1. 2-1. Brazil ain't missed a penalty yet. Neither has Croatia. But anyways, okay. Malone was a pick and roll guy, half court offense. You know what I mean? Malone though runs the floor with the best of them for big man. You know what I mean? Malone would run the floor, and he would always beat the guy who's guarding him down the floor for maybe an outlet pass from the man Stockton, or in the half court, the the pick and roll thing. Pick and pop. And at the end of his career, when Malone was winning 2 MVPs, you know, on the Utah Jazz in his later years, that pick and pop, man, his bang, 2-2, man. These fellas ain't trying to lose, man. Modric smashed that joint. You know, them fellas, Karl Malone's mid range was butter at the end of his career. You know what I mean? It wasn't so much the pick and roll where he's catching it from Stockton and flushing with one hand. You know what I'm saying? You know, Karl Malone was a gym rat. He was cut. He was diesel. You know what I mean? Slim was yoked up. Something serious. You check it. Now, that's those guys. You know, Barkley obviously had 3-point range. I'm not saying he stood out there and shot the 3-pointer all day on some Dirk Nowitzki, Rasheed Wallace. Ooh, you check it. Now, but Barkley post game, I gotta give it up to Barkley with the better post game. Back to the basket, bang on you, take you down low, and get to his spot, and he can finish around the basket better to me than Karl Malone. You know what I mean? I don't take nothing away from Karl Malone. Don't get it twisted. I know a lot of people try to do, but we only talking about hoops, nothing more, nothing less. We're not talking about your personal feelings towards him or his personal life outside of basketball. We're talking about inside the 94 feet NBA basketball court. Let's see if this Croatian gonna bang this joint. Let me see. Oh, Lord. Anyways, now, these are the guys from the 90s, okay? Barkley and Malone, all right? Like I said, by the time he retired, Malone and Barkley, they were considered the greatest power forwards of all time. A lot of people also gotta consider that, you know, these guys started from the 80s, mid 80s to the 90s. You know what I mean? And then in the 2000s, now we have Kevin Garnett and Tim Duncan. Okay? Somebody about to miss this joint, man. I feel this guy gonna miss the penalty. Hold tight. Sorry, man. I'm doing this video live. No cutting, no editing, none of that. Holy cow! Croatia beat Brazil. Brazil going home. Hey, man. Hey, man. Brazil ain't been to the won the World Cup since 2002. Here we are, 2022. They're gonna wait another 24 years to get a chance. Hey, man. I'm not gonna cry for them. Hell yeah, they lost. Hell yeah, they lost. Sleep. That man missed. That man missed that joint. Damn, fellas crying. Fellas crying. I should have put some money on this game. I should have put some money on this joint. Anyways, now Kevin Garnett and Tim Duncan, right?
Why is he crying? Because he missed the penalty.
Yeah, he did. Kevin Garnett and Duncan are not as prolific scorers as Barkley and Malone, okay? But Kevin Garnett and Tim Duncan, when we talking about defense, you can't name no power forwards in NBA history who are greater defenders of the basketball than Kevin Garnett and Tim Duncan. You know what I'm saying? That's just the truth about it. I told y'all, Barkley and Malone were prolific scorers in the 80s and 90s. You know, they've averaged as much as 28 points per game. You know, fellas like Karl Malone, I know he's averaged 30 something in his career. You know what I mean? That's a fact. You check it. But fellas like Malone, KG and them, they was probably career highs. Malone's best season scoring was the 1990 season. He averaged 31 per game. You know, fellas like Charles Barkley, I know his most he averaged 28 point something points, 28.3 in 1988. That guy blew it. Sorry, my boy. Sorry, my boy. You're going to have to go back to Brazil, man. They're going to be on your neck. Slim missed the whole penalty. That's on you, my G. That's on you. Anyways, back to hoops. Now, Tim Duncan, of course, is the big fundamental. Not an exciting player by no stretch of the imagination. But Tim Duncan gets busy, boy. Tim Duncan was the first guy I seen really take Shaq and give him that work in the post and really beat him. You know what I mean? In the NBA playoffs, Lakers versus Spurs. You know, Tim Duncan's bank shot off the glass was money. You check it. Tim Duncan is a master defending the paint. You know, Tim Duncan is a guy. Obviously, he's taller than Barkley and Malone. And also KG, I believe Tim Duncan is 6'11", 7 feet, or 7 feet, and Kevin Garnett is 6'11". But defensively, you got to give it up to KG and Duncan. Kevin Garnett though was a little bit more skilled overall than Tim Duncan. As far as putting the ball through his legs, dribbling the rock, yanking fellas. You know what I'm saying? Bringing the ball up at times like a point forward and setting up the offense. The offense would run through him, whether it be at top of the key or in the post, Kevin Garnett had a beautiful turnaround jump shot, you know what I mean? High arcing shot that he shoots from behind his head, Now, who do I consider better between Duncan and KG? KG won a championship for my team, but Duncan does have the 5 rings in 6 finals appearances. Overall, I gotta give it up to Tim Duncan. He beat Kevin Garnett many of times. San Antonio Spurs versus Minnesota Timberwolves in the playoffs. And I've always thought in my watching basketball, I always thought whether if Kevin Garnett played with them San Antonio teams in place of Tim Duncan, would Kevin Garnett have 5 NBA championships in 6 attempts? We'll never know. That's hyperbole and conjecture. We'll never know because Kevin Garnett did play on the teams he played on, right? Minnesota, then Boston, then the Brooklyn Nets, and I believe he went back to Minnesota and retired with Minnesota. But the reason I make this video because in my opinion, and we'll see if you guys agree with this or not, I've always considered Malone and Barkley to be the best power forwards. But then came along Tim Duncan and Kevin Garnett. And in my opinion, I think Kevin Garnett and Tim Duncan have surpassed Malone and Barkley as the greater power forwards. You know what I mean? I do have all four of these guys in the top five, dead or alive, greatest power forwards of all time. I'll give you my list in a sec before I finish this video. But obviously, I consider Tim Duncan the greatest power forward of all time. Second of all time, I got to give it up to Kevin Garnett. Like I said, Kevin Garnett and Duncan were not prolific scorers as as Barkley and Malone. Let me tell y'all, the most points Kevin Garnett averaged in a season, I think, was about 24 points per game. Let me let y'all know which year that was. Maybe his MVP year, 24.2. And absolutely, yeah, that was his MVP year, 2004. Okay, guys like Malone averaged 31. Barkley averaged 28. Those was his best seasons. And I believe Tim Duncan's best scoring season of his career was 25.5 points per game, and that was in the year 2002. Okay, and that's why it baffles me how fellas like Draymond Green, stupid ass, said that LeBron James came into the NBA in 2003, and by 2005 he was the best NBA player. Are you serious? LeBron James in 2005 was not better than Shaq, Iverson. He wasn't better than Dirk Nowitzki. He wasn't better than Tim Duncan and Kevin Garnett. I could probably name some more other players where that's why Draymond Green, he's a clown. But anyways, and the edge why I said Kevin Garnett, I give it to him as the second greatest behind Tim Duncan, is because of defense, y'all. Hey man, defense wins championships in any sport. Whether it's soccer, whether it's NFL, whether it's NBA, whether it's boxing. Look at Floyd Mayweather. Defense. Why you think Slim got to 50 wins and zero losses? Floyd Mayweather's defense was airtight. Defense wins championships, right? Because if the next team trying to score and they cannot score, you got to get points on the scoreboard. If the defensive team is stopping you from getting them points, more times than not, they're going to win. You know what I mean? I.e., like the Baltimore Ravens in the Ray Lewis eras. He got two championships because of defense, Ed Reed and them. You know what I'm saying? And the first championship with fellas like Rod Woodson and them. Go do your homework. So so that's why I give Kevin Garnett and Duncan the edge. Obviously, they have the height to bother guys like Malone and Barkley if they were playing 2-on-2. Let's say a 2-on-2, Kevin Garnett and Duncan versus Malone and Barkley. I'm going to have to give the edge to KG and Tim Duncan. Kevin Garnett was like a freak, a guy who was 6'11", who, for many seasons was a guy giving you 20 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists consistently. I just told you, Slim got 4 rebounding titles under his belt. Kevin Garnett. Duncan doesn't have any, but Duncan's accolades as far as the championships is what puts him over the edge as the greatest power forward of all time. Now, a lot of people go start hating, and they might come in this video and they'll say, well, Tim Duncan was also a center. Yeah, he played center. Yeah, he played center at the end of his career, because that's what we're not going to do. You got to remember, he played with David Robinson for many years, right? You got to remember, Tim Duncan's won championships with Rasho Nesterovic and Nazir Muhammad. Those two guys I mentioned were centers, and Tim Duncan played the power forward. Later on in his career, when he was old, maybe in his 13th, 14th, 15th year, that's when Tim Duncan moved over to the center position. So his greatest years were at the power forward. So don't come in the comment section with no stupid stuff. Talk about Tim Duncan was a center. He played center at the end of his career. During his prime, he was a power forward, and you guys know that. If you don't know, don't talk about stuff that you don't know. Okay. And that's why I give Malone, KG and Duncan the edge over Malone and CB34. Now, my greatest top 5 power forwards of all time, I give number 1 to Tim Duncan. Number 2, I give it to Kevin Garnett. Number 3, I give it to Charles Barkley. Number 4, I give it to Karl Malone, the mailman. And number 5, look, I'm not going to be biased just because, I'm a Boston Celtics fan, but you got to put fellas like what's his name? I got to give it up to my man Kevin McHale. Kevin McHale's a great player, but I will concede if somebody comes and tells me about Bob Pettit. I respect Bob Pettit. Bob Pettit was a bad man from the 50s and the 60s. Bob Pettit is the only man who's ever beat Bill Russell in an NBA Finals. No man has ever beat Bill Russell in an NBA Finals except Bob Pettit. So if you want to tell me Bob Pettit is the fifth greatest, I got no qualms, no complaints. You won't even hear me try to debate you. You know what I mean? But it's either Bob Pettit or the man Kevin McHale, you know. Now, Kevin McHale didn't start off his NBA career as that dude. You know, he came off the bench. You know, he won maybe one or two NBA Six Mans of the Year. But you already know, in case you don't know, as soon as the Celtics traded Cedric Maxwell and they inserted the man Kevin McHale into the starting lineup, he blew up. He blew up like Nitron. You know, I'm talking about in his first year as a starter, this man, Kevin McHale, was averaging 28 points per game. There's nothing else to talk about, man. If you don't believe me, do your homework. See, me, I'm a boxing and an NBA historian. If I come and talk about stuff here on this YouTube stuff, I know what I'm talking about. You check it, and yeah, that's my take, man. You know, I gotta give it up to the man, the 2000 power forwards, because these guys brought defense to the table. And I didn't really mention that the NBA championships, with Tim Duncan having 5 and Kevin Garnett having 1 NBA championship and 2 finals appearances, that to me is not what gives them the edge over Barkley and Malone, who both have 0 championships. No, I'm talking about the impact on the game on both ends of the court and the intensity. I believe in my heart that Kevin Garnett was a harder worker, and Tim Duncan. These guys were harder workers than Charles Barkley. You know how Charles Barkley's weight used to fluctuate, you know? He was a guy who sometimes would have weight problems, you know what I mean? Great player, but discipline wise, it's obvious that Duncan and KG are more disciplined and more defensive. They and especially Kevin Garnett's intensity. You know, Kevin Garnett's the type of guy who will talk trash to you so crazy, man, you might want to cry or quit the NBA. And that's who Kevin Garnett was, you know. Tim Duncan is a very soft-spoken person. He don't talk trash. He lets his game do the talking. Charles Barkley talks trash. Karl Malone talks trash too, you know. But those guys' intensity, I believe, to me, watching NBA all these years, fellas like Kevin Garnett and Tim Duncan, they wanted to win more. They wanted it more than guys like Barkley and what's his name, and Barkley and the Mailman. Now the Mailman, it was remarkable in '97 and '98. As an old man, him and Stockton were old heads. They took their teams. They took them Utah Jazz to the NBA Finals, and they ran into Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan did what he did. He beat them. You know. Now I'll never ever consider that Karl Malone played on as great teams as Tim Duncan did. You know, Tim Duncan had the luxury of coming to the NBA and playing with one of the greatest centers of all time in David Robinson. You know, that's you don't Kevin Garnett didn't have those type of players that he played with. In Minnesota, the best players Kevin Garnett ever played with was Sam Cassell and Latrell Sprewell. And Sam Cassell and Latrell Sprewell, I love those guys, especially Cassell. I'm probably the biggest Sam Cassell fan in the world. But, Sam Cassell and Sprewell, they're not going to the Hall of Fame. You know what I mean? Tim Duncan played with David Robinson, Manu Ginobili, and Tony Parker. All those guys are going to the Hall of Fame. Tim Duncan also played with Kawhi Leonard. He's going to the Hall of Fame. So Duncan, obviously, he played with greater players than Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, and Kevin Garnett. You know what I mean? But that's my take, y'all. Best power forwards of all time. I got to give it up to the guys from the 90s. I'm sorry, the 2000s. Tim Duncan and Kevin Garnett over Charles Barkley and Karl Malone. Leave your thoughts and comments. B Marsh Boxing, doing a basketball video. I thought this joint would be a little shorter, but hey, man, I got to talking about NBA hoops, man, and I get a little excited. Peace and love to everybody out there. Leave your thoughts and comments. If you're new to the channel, please share and subscribe. Hit the thumbs up if you like the content. And please Share your opinions in the comment section. Whatever it is, let it be known how you feel about who are the better power forwards of all time. B Marsh Boxing, I'm gone. Peace.